Have you ever wondered how a system as oppressive as apartheid found its roots in South Africa? The answer lies deep in the annals of history, tracing back to the 17th century. The story begins with the arrival of the Dutch in South Africa, back in 1652. Drawn by the promise of the spice trade, the Dutch East India Company established a settlement at the Cape of Good Hope. This marked the beginning of European colonization in South Africa. The native African population was gradually displaced, their lands taken over by the colonists. Over time, the Dutch settlers, also known as Boers, developed their unique identity, distinct from their European roots. They began to view South Africa as their rightful land, though they shared it with indigenous tribes and later, British colonizers. As we move into the 19th century, the discovery of diamonds and gold heightened the existing racial tensions. The British, who had taken control of the Cape from the Dutch, enforced policies favoring European miners over their African counterparts. This led to the infamous Anglo-Boer War at the turn of the century, a struggle over the control of these lucrative resources. In the aftermath of this conflict, the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910, marking the beginning of a series of segregation policies. The Land Act of 1913 restricted the majority black African population to reserved territories, severely limiting their ability to own land outside these areas. This was just one of the many policies that laid the groundwork for the institutionalized racism that would later be known as apartheid. These early segregation policies, the racial tensions, and the struggle for resources all played a significant role in shaping the oppressive system of apartheid. The roots of this system were deeply entrenched in South Africa's history, and its effects would be felt for many decades to come. As we can see, the stage for apartheid was set long before the term was even coined. The seeds of apartheid were sown by the winds of history, nurtured by racial prejudice, and watered by the thirst for resources. So, when did apartheid officially begin? And what did it entail? The year was 1948. The National Party, a political faction rooted in Afrikaner nationalism and a belief in racial segregation, ascended to power in South Africa. They campaigned on a platform of apartheid, an Afrikaans term meaning apartness. This was the dawning of an era that would cast a long, dark shadow over South Africa for over 4 decades. The National Party wasted no time in implementing apartheid laws, a series of legislations designed to enforce systematic racial segregation and white supremacy. The cornerstone of these laws was the Population Registration Act of 1950, which classified South Africans into 4 racial groups: white, black, colored, and Indian. This act determined where you could live, work, and even who you could marry. The Group Areas Act of 1950 was another pivotal piece of legislation. It designated specific residential and business sections for each racial group. The most desirable areas were reserved for whites, while non-whites were relegated to live in separate, often underdeveloped regions, known as townships. Then came the Bantu Education Act of 1953. This act sought to further segregate South African society by controlling the educational opportunities available to non-white South Africans. The aim was to limit their prospects and ensure they remained subservient to the white population. These laws, along with many others, formed the backbone of the apartheid system. They were designed to maintain white dominance while controlling every aspect of life for the non-white population. The effects were devastating, leading to widespread inequality, poverty, and suffering. Apartheid was more than just a collection of laws or a political policy. It was a meticulously designed system that invaded every aspect of South African life. It was a monstrous machine, fueled by prejudice and fear, that sought to divide and rule by enforcing a rigid racial hierarchy. And so, the birth of apartheid marked the start of a dark chapter in South Africa's history, a chapter that would take decades of struggle, sacrifice, and resilience to overcome. Apartheid was not just a policy, it was a system that invaded every aspect of South African life. But how did the world react to this system of institutionalized racism? The resistance to apartheid was not a silent one. It was a symphony of voices, both local and international, harmonizing in their condemnation of the oppressive regime. At the heart of the local resistance was the African National Congress, or the ANC. Formed in the early 20th century, the ANC became the leading voice of opposition against apartheid, championing peaceful protests and civil disobedience. One of the most significant moments in the ANC's fight against apartheid was the Defiance Campaign in the early 1950s. Thousands of South Africans, black and white, united in their defiance against unjust laws. They willingly broke apartheid regulations, risking arrest, to send a clear message: they would not be silenced. The Soweto uprising in the mid-70s was another pivotal moment in the resistance. Triggered by the introduction of Afrikaans as the medium of instruction in local schools, the uprising saw thousands of students take to the streets in protest. The government's violent response shocked the world and amplified international condemnation of apartheid. Speaking of international response, the world was not just a spectator, it actively participated in the fight against apartheid. Countries around the globe imposed sanctions on South Africa, refusing to engage in trade or sporting events. Protesters took to the streets worldwide, standing in solidarity with the people of South Africa. At the epicenter of the resistance stood a figure who needs no introduction: Nelson Mandela. A charismatic leader of the ANC, Mandela became the face of the anti-apartheid movement, inspiring millions with his courage and resilience. His long walk to freedom, culminating in his release from prison after 27 years, became a beacon of hope for those yearning for a free and equal South Africa. Despite the oppressive regime, voices of resistance echoed both within and outside South Africa. Their crescendo, amplified by the international community, would ultimately lead to the collapse of apartheid, turning a new page in South Africa's history. What led to the fall of this seemingly impenetrable system, you might ask? The demise of apartheid was not an overnight event, but a painstaking process that involved a series of significant milestones. The 1980s saw increasing internal resistance and global pressure against the apartheid regime. The economic sanctions imposed by the international community began to take a toll, making the continuation of apartheid economically unsustainable. The mounting pressure led the South African government to make some notable concessions. One of the most significant events was the release of Nelson Mandela in February 1990, after 27 long years of incarceration. Mandela, a symbol of resistance against apartheid, emerged not with a heart full of vengeance but with a vision for a unified and democratic South Africa. This was followed by the repeal of apartheid laws, a process initiated by then-President F.W. de Klerk. The legislative backbone of apartheid was gradually dismantled, starting with the lifting of the ban on anti-apartheid political parties and culminating in the abolishment of the last of the apartheid laws in June 1991. But the journey wasn't over yet. The next step was to pave the way for a democratic South Africa, and that meant drafting a new constitution. These negotiations were fraught with challenges, but they eventually led to the adoption of an interim constitution in 1993, which guaranteed equal rights for all South Africans. The climax of this journey was the general elections of 1994, the first in South African history where citizens of all races were allowed to participate. The world watched as millions of South Africans, black and white, stood in long lines to cast their votes, a powerful symbol of the end of apartheid. The fall of apartheid marked the dawn of a new era for South Africa, but the scars of the past remain. The struggle for justice and equality was a long and arduous one, and the path to healing these wounds is still a journey that South Africa continues to embark on today. What has been the lasting impact of apartheid on South Africa? Apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation, may have officially ended in the early 90s, but its effects continue to ripple through South Africa like a stone tossed into a still pond. The country has made significant strides towards equality, but the legacy of apartheid lingers, casting a long shadow over the Rainbow Nation. One of the most visible remnants of apartheid is the stark racial disparities in wealth and education. Despite the end of legal segregation, the majority of South Africa's wealth and resources remain disproportionately in the hands of a small, predominantly white minority. This economic inequality has its roots in the apartheid era, where non-white populations were systematically denied access to quality education and lucrative job opportunities. In the realm of education, the impact of apartheid is also evident. Historical imbalances in the quality of schooling between racial groups persist, with many black South Africans still attending under-resourced schools. The effects of this educational disparity are far-reaching, contributing to the cycle of poverty and hindering social mobility. In the wake of apartheid, South Africa established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the mid-90s. This body was tasked with uncovering the truth about human rights abuses during the apartheid era and facilitating reconciliation between perpetrators and victims. While the commission was not without its criticisms, it represented a crucial step in addressing the injustices of the past and fostering healing in a divided nation. Yet the road to true equality and justice is long and fraught with challenges. South Africa continues to grapple with the ghosts of its past as it strives to build a more inclusive and equitable future. Apartheid has ended, but its legacy continues to shape South Africa. History reminds us of the importance of vigilance against racial discrimination and the relentless pursuit of equality. History is not just about understanding the past, it's about learning from it to shape our future. The legacy of apartheid in South Africa serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of racial discrimination and segregation. It underlines the importance of promoting equality, justice, and inclusivity in all societies. And while the struggle against the remnants of apartheid continues, it is crucial for us, as global citizens, to stand in solidarity with those fighting against racial discrimination in all its forms. It begins with education and understanding, and that's where platforms like this YouTube channel come in. Our aim is to inform, educate, and provoke thought. If you found this video informative and would like to support our mission of spreading knowledge, we encourage you to like this video, comment with your thoughts or questions, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Remember, every like, comment, and subscription helps us reach more people, fostering a more informed and empathetic world. In the fight for equality and justice, every voice matters. So let's learn from history and strive to make our world a better place. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more enlightening content.